Good morning. It's Friday, July 9th. More importantly, for our purposes, the 29th of Tammuz, Erev Ch6. Tomorrow will be Ch6 Menachem Av, and of course, historically a time of sadness. We pray that those days be transformed to days of simcha, of joy, jubilation, and certainly that will be the case with the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. But presently, we're studying the entire Talmud, one page and one line at a time. Presently, Ch6, Shabbas, chapter 6, Samach Beis Amud Aleph, that would be 62a. And we're at the tail end of the analysis of a Mishnah that gives a list of items that a man mustn't wear outside in the public domain on Shabbos. All the items, as we've discussed, have been rabbinically prohibited, restricted for a variety of reasons. So although maybe biblically it would be acceptable, Chacham added an additional tier of restriction to uphold the observance of Shabbos and to prevent a biblical desecration of Shabbos. We spent yesterday and the day before that talking about different matters. We spent a little stretch this week talking about how to tie your shoes, because there was a correlation between shoe wearing and the tefillin. And before that, the idea of shoe wearing is because the Mishnah talks about different kinds of shoes and how to wear them, a single shoe, etc. Yesterday and the day before that, we were talking about kameyas, amulets, and if and how and when they might be able to be worn, if and how they could be established to be reputable, credible kameyas with a good track record. And it has to do with tracking prior successes of the kameya writers and the kameyas themselves. We then wanted to understand the question of if they have sanctity, and the question was lamai hilchasa, what was the halachic relevance, and we established that halachic relevance has to do with if you can wear them into the restroom. Who cares about that? And of course, in the analysis of that question, it became clear that question would immediately contribute to the question of which kind of kameya can and cannot be worn on Shabbos, because there is the potential concern that if you're not allowed to wear a kameya into a restroom, you would remove it and then you'd come to be susceptible to carrying it. And ultimately, the Gemara answers that a kameya is typically worn in a kind of pouch. Here, I'm just going to hit mute because I'm hearing my voice. Please unmute for questions and comments. Who just joined? Here, Dr. Pasternak. So again, ultimately, the final answer is the kameya is covered in a leather pouch. Therefore, Hashem's names that could be potentially in a kameya are not exposed to the restroom. It's not considered dishonorable treatment of the kameya. And we contrast that to tefillin, where tefillin, although the parshiyos are covered, but the tefillin are not just the portions, the segments of the writings that are in the tefillin. A tefillin also includes the boxes. Halacha is very meticulous about it. It even includes Hashem's name, namely the shin that's on the box. According to one version of the Gemara, the Dalet and the Yud that is found in the Ritzuos as well. According to Ch6, the main issue here is the shin. But bottom line, there's a strong distinction between tefillin and an amulet. Obviously, and I think Alan meant to say this, maybe he did say this, there's another big distinction, but not for the purposes of bathroom, which is that an amulet is not a mitzvah. An amulet is something that you might optionally choose to do if you find comfort or believe that could be helpful in your healing process. Tefillin is an absolute mitzvah. But the area we were zooming in on was Shem Hashem, the names of Hashem, and passages from the Torah, and that would be something they have in common. And so that was yesterday's Gemara. Today we're going to begin the Gemara discussing the final tail end of the Mishnah, which lists items which are part of armor, the kind of armor that a soldier, a warrior might wear to battle, and maybe once upon a time even more frequently than went to battle. Maybe certain people always wanted to be identified with their status as a knight, if you will, or something to that effect. So let's share the screen. Let's see that final segment of the Gemara right here, and then we'll look at the pictures to provide some additional information. So here we go. The Mishnah writes, "V'loy b'shiryoin, v'loy b'kasta, v'loy b'magafayim." A man, and obviously a woman, but even a man. The reason why I say obviously women, because women in those days didn't wear armor to the same degree as men, if at all. And so even for a man, where it might be considered part of the typical fashion look for a guy, you still shouldn't wear it on Shabbos. But first, the Gemara needs to define what exactly they are, and then we'll look at the pictures and we'll see if the pictures effectively portray what we're talking about. So the Mishnah says, or I'm sorry, the Gemara says, Shiryon. What is Shiryon? So the interesting thing, we have some Israelis or some very close Israelis. Let me ask her, Beryl Schuster. Shiryon in Israel, what is, or Mark, what does Shiryon mean? I muted everyone, so I need you to unmute if you have any.
Yeah, Shiryon, I guess it's, I don't know.
I think Shiryon means armored tanks. Is that correct?
Could be they use code of mail. I guess we could cheat and see what Google says.
So this is really, if that is the case, this is certainly a development of the word, because in the time of the Talmud and the Mishnah, they did not have tanks. As a matter of fact, they didn't even have tanks until fairly recently.
The translation is armor.
So Chel HaShiryon means armored vehicles, tanks. Tanks are armored vehicles, right? So in Hebrew, the word for tank is more closely related to the actual item as opposed to the new word. So Chel HaShiryon, I just opened Wikipedia. Well, I searched on Google and it's opening to Wikipedia. So Chel HaShiryon means the armored division, the armored vehicle division. Rashi, Wikipedia, not Rashi, says Chel HaShiryon HaYisraeli hu HaChel HaMetamren HaIkri B'Zerua Yabasha Shel Tzva Haganah Yisrael. This is the division that focuses primarily on land. V'hu mibein Chelot HaShiryon HaGedolim Be'olam. It's one of the largest tank armies in the world. Chel HaShiryon mevases et kocho Ikar kocho al tankei maracha, and it primarily is focused on battle. It's probably a better word, but tanks that are battlefield ready. The colors are the colors, and on. So Shiryon means armored vehicles.
Literally, it translates to armor. So I guess it could be a vehicle or just armor. Back then, the armor they wore themselves.
Right. So in those days, armor was what you wore on your body. Today, you have armored vehicles, and tanks, of course, being the most whatever you want to call it. All right, Shiryon. But our Gemara says we don't know what this Shiryon is. So they give a word that was probably more familiar. They said Zarda. What is Zarda? Rashi says it's Brunya. Okay, this is like detective work, right? Because none of these words are particularly familiar to us. So we're going to do what we've been doing, or we haven't done for a while. Let's search for our Rashi translation, and let's see what they call a barada. Again, I think we know it's going to translate something along the lines of a male armor or male link armor. Let's just do this real fast so we can see what Rashi wants to tell us. Oh, by the way, we should point out that it's likely that Rashi was intimately familiar with the kind of armor that folks would wear in the era, in that time period. All right, here we go. Zrada Brunya Shiryon Min Kutonet Mechuse Bechatichot Mateches, a kind of coat that's covered with pieces of metal, steel plates, as the English write it. So I'll tell you something. To me, armor, Brunya probably meant armor, not mail. Mail, in my mind, maybe I'm wrong. I always thought it was links, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone? A coat of mail is usually a coat that has links in it. Can someone correct me if I'm wrong? Here, coat of mail. This is what I imagine. I imagine something looking like this. Or probably this. Or this. Armor, again, I may be totally off. It's this, but to me, armor was something that I imagine looked more like, well, being that I'm searching for coat of mail, it's going to show me that. But armor, I imagine, looks something like, well, whatever, that looks like a dress up, but I think you get the point. Something like this. That's what I imagine.
This looks like a much later technology. It really requires advanced technology,
metal,
metallurgy.
So you're saying mail would be a lot easier to fashion even in older times, whereas to have these more elaborate, solid panels of metal with joints and to allow for some degree of movement, although I am doubtful that there was the most agility available in armor. Anyway, okay, I know we're going a little overboard, but okay. So our Gemara says Shiryon is Zarda. Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it a coat of mail. Rashi translates it Brunya, which sounds a little bit closer to armor. But likely, I think the professor is getting at is that there was an evolution of just how they manufactured the item, but we shouldn't get bogged down by the details if it's mail or armor, because ultimately, both of those items are just the latest technology of the day. Is that my friend Dr. Arad? Good morning. Well, listen, through the Ch6, pardon me, folks. Good morning. We're giving a class here, but I had to interrupt to say hello. And I want to thank you for responding last minute to help get in on the action. This is my brother, Shalom, you talk to. He'll take care of you. Thank you, doctor. All right, Shiryon, Zarda. So he said Shiryon would be armor, coat of mail. And here he says armor made of scales. Rashi maybe was talking about the armor of his age. And let's take a picture, let's take a sneak peek. Rabbi Steinsaltz includes in his work a picture of someone, and this guy looks probably like he was a Roman kind of armor. So there you have it. That's the picture of the armor.
You don't have the picture on.
I'm sorry?
You don't have the picture.
So can you see my screen?
I can.
All right, I'm going to stop the share and reshare. Let's see if it works. So the picture I was trying to show you is this one. Dr. Pasternak, do you see the picture?
Yes.
It's a black and white picture of a guy dressed in Roman-like armor. My suspicion, although it's colorful, this is probably metal, this is probably leather. But the point that we're talking about, we're not talking about the helmet, we're talking about the armor, and primarily, I believe, the part that's covering his upper body, and that's the part that we're calling here Shiryon or Zarda. But of course, Shiryon, we said, means armor, and even to this day, as discussed at length, Shiryon is the word we use for the division that is primarily tanks. Kasda. Then you have another word in the Mishnah, which is kasta. What is kasta? Amar Rav. Rav said, San Varta. It is a leather. Again, I'm using Rabbi Steinsaltz's translation, which is identical to Rashi. Sanvarta would be a leather hat that's worn under a metal helmet. So if we can imagine wearing a hat, a helmet made of metal, that would be not very comfortable. And therefore, you might want to put some padding under your helmet. And so that's the next item we're discussing. Doctor, Shabbat Shalom, thank you. Magapayim. The Mishnah also lists Magapayim. What are Magapayim? Amarav Puzmaki. That's leg armor. So Rabbi Steinsaltz translates leg armor. Rashi An Plaot Shel Barzel Malchama. This is like a shin guard, a thing that covers your leg in battle. And you know what? When you're in battle, you might want to have such an accessory. And so Rabbi Steinsaltz provides a picture of shin guards of the Roman style, which is reasonable to assume that the Gemara was not so far removed from Roman style clothing. And certainly the Mishnah was very much in the era of Roman control of the Israel. And so it's likely that all these words would be intending to express styles that were common in that period of time. Oh, here. Rabbi Steinsaltz provides a picture of the helmet of a Roman soldier. Unfortunately, this is not the leather underpart. I suspect that's less portrayed in pictures because it's on the inside. Just like you wouldn't necessarily know that NFL players have pads under their helmet, even though it's obvious to us. But if you're from a different era, you couldn't tell from the picture because that's not the part that is shown. So that, my dear friends, partially concludes our discussion of the items of the Mishnah. And suffice it to say, our Mishnah teaches that one ought not wear these items on Shabbos. And now we know what they are. Armor, shin guards, and some kind of hat. Now, next question or next point to mention, when one would be compelled to go to battle, because sometimes that happens, and a battle is allowed to be waged on Shabbos, certainly one would be permitted to wear such accessories. The prohibition is merely when you're doing your regular old thing, observing Shabbos. Give me another, indulge me for one more second, and then we're going to continue. Rabbi Steinsaltz in the printed book gives a little bit more of a presentation of the etymology of these words. And he says that, for example, Zarda, which means the armor, it's a word from Middle Iranian. Middle Persian. It was called Zre or Zra. So there's different words which evolve into Zurada. It pays to point out that the Mishnah was composed in Israel, which was under Roman influence. The Gemara was developed in Iraq, which was under Iranian rule. So it's not surprising at all that the words the Mishnah would use, the Gemara would use, would be related to Persian. Kasda, that's actually from the Latin word cassis. Cassidus means a metal helmet. The Hebrew word is an abbreviation of the Greek word Chassidion or Chassidion. And in Babel, they didn't know this word, Kasda. And so therefore they needed to translate it because it was a Roman word. And so they gave a Greek word as well, the Sanvarta, which Sanvarta is Old Persian for head covering. And so there you have it. Rabbi Steinsaltz provides some of the development and the evolution of these words. Now we conclude the second Mishnah of our chapter, the second Mishnah, which was a series of items that are not to be worn rabbinically. Chazal prohibit for a man to wear. And now we're going to go back to some items that men and women both can't wear, or sometimes there's contrasting halacha. These items will be somewhat familiar because we've quoted them in the course of our study of the first two Mishnahs. Before we jump into the next Mishnah, any comments, thoughts to close out this Mishnah? Anyone? Alrighty, let's continue. Mishnah, new Mishnah. A woman mustn't go out on Shabbos wearing a needle with a hole in it, a perforated needle, which means a regular normal needle with an eye that a woman cannot wear. Right? We read this already. We've analyzed this. But now we're seeing it in its Mishnah, the original source. A woman also mustn't wear a ring if it has a seal or a signet on it, which, as we discussed previously, a signet or a seal is typically meant for administrative purposes. Sometimes it would signify authority or an office of power. And that in those days was common for men and not for women. And therefore, it would not be considered an appropriate style. It was not a conventional style for ladies of that time. And so the Mishnah prohibits wearing it. Again, women wearing a ring with a signet. Velo b'koleyar, nor may women wear a koliyar. What is that? Rashi tells us the Gemara will translate, and the Gemara is pretty good at providing translations. Velo b'kovelet, similarly, a woman must not wear a kovelet, and we'll discuss what a kovelet is. Velo b'tzlochet shel playatin, nor may a proper halachic lady go out with a flask of balsam oil. Now, all of you are wondering what I'm wondering, which is, we've been talking about clothing, garments all this time. So where does a jug come in? What's the deal? So before we discuss that, Rashi points out, right, Phyton means balsama. Mishcha da farsama, this is balsam oil. So now again,
didn't we have the ring in the previous Mishnah?
Oh, very good. So the previous Mishnah talked about any kind of ring. a ring that's common for women to wear, they should also not wear because they might take it off. That was a rabbinic concern. Biblically, it would be permissible. Here, we're escalating we're escalating how prohibited the items are. These items, if I'm not mistaken, would be prohibited biblically because they are not considered tachshitim, they are not considered adornments for ladies, halachic ladies, in the time of the Mishnah. So again, the previous list, Reb Beryl, good question, were tachshitim, adornments and clothing that, again, Minat Torah, biblically, you could wear the chazal restricted lest you come to carry it.
But it mentioned the ring with the signet specifically.
No, we quoted this Mishnah and we quoted a brisa to contrast the fact that men and women have different biblical restrictions, but we certainly never said, so a lady, a woman, from the Mishnah's perspective, mustn't wear either kind of ring. They shouldn't wear their wedding band according to the Mishnah, or their diamond ring, or any other kind of ring. And they also shouldn't wear a ring that has their insignia or their logo or their signet, their seal. But there's a difference. One is a rabbinic prohibition, and one touches upon biblical prohibition. All the items of our Mishnah are restricted biblically. And so although it's similar, it's very, very different. And that's why the Mishnah sorts the items as it does. Fair answer, Beryl?
I don't have the previous Mishnah in front of me. I don't know. I sort of remember the ring specifically mentioned.
I told you that it mentions a ring that's not a signet ring.
Right.
Let's open the Mishnah now. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to open the Mishnah. Why is it Mishnah? Hold on, give me a second. Hopefully this will do it. Here we go. Here's our Mishnah. This is the first Mishnah. What can a woman go out or not? So we talked about her hair. We talked about other kinds of decorative adornments. Then we say, nor may they go out with a tabas without a seal. Nor may they go out with a needle that does not have an eye. This is the important line to define the difference between our Mishnah and this Mishnah, the imyotzas. If they did break this law and they did go out, eina chayeves chatas. They do not need to bring a chatas because this is not a biblical prohibition. Then the Mishnah goes on to list us. This is the Mishnah we just finished. It goes through a whole list of items. And then the Mishnah now goes back and says, you know what? Isha, b'machat hanekuva, and these are all biblically prohibited.
Yeah, because we asked the question then, if she could go out with one that doesn't have a seal, doesn't mean she could go with one with a seal. So here's your answer.
Yes. Shkoyach Rebel. Hold on, I just lost my place here. Now the reason why it's confusing. The reason why it's confusing is we need to now read this next line, which again, along with the Mishnah we just read, will point to the distinction. The imyatzas, if a lady goes out wearing a ring with a seal, or a needle with an eye in it, or these other not yet defined words, or a flask of balsam oil, those would all be biblical problems. Imyatzas, if she did so, chayeves, chatas, she might need to bring a sin offering for breaching the biblical commandment of Shabbos observance. Not everybody agrees. Divrei Rabbi Meir. This is the position of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say some of these things you do need to bring a sin offering, but for two items it would not be biblical, and that would be the kovelet with slochet shel palyat. For two items, the Chachamim say a woman would not be considered to have transgressed Shabbos biblically. Rabbi Steinsaltz, in their opinion, these are ornaments, and therefore they don't fundamentally violate the Torah prohibition of carrying in a public domain. And Rashi says in more short words, Kasavar, lavtach shitninu. All of these things would be considered a biblical prohibition if it is the belief and understanding that they are not considered ornamental in their in nature. So that concludes the third Mishnah of our chapter. We're going to read a few lines of the Gemara's analysis, and we might end just a few minutes early. So let's continuing. Amar Ula taught regarding this Mishnah with all of the restrictions which we present as biblical in nature. And as Rabbi Steinsaltz points out, and as Rashi points out, Atabas Koi. Ula says that will say the opposite for a man. What does that mean? That for a ring, and this we mentioned before, and that's what Beryl you asked. For a man, he could wear a ring with a signet, with a seal. But he could not go out with a ring without a signet, right? Rabbi Steinsaltz. With regards to that which we learned in the Mishnah, that a woman may not go out on Shabbos with a ring that has a seal. And by inference, she may go out with a ring without a seal. Biblically, Ula said the reverse of these halachas are said with regards to a man. A man wears a ring with a seal in the public domain is exempt. When a man has a ring with his business, whatever you call it, he's exempt. However, if he wears a ring without a seal, if he wears a wedding band, he is liable to bring the sin offering as it is not considered an ornament for a man. In the time of the Mishnah, in the time of the Gemara, it was not considered conventional for a man to wear a wedding band or a diamond ring or any other kind of ring. And therefore, in the time of the Mishnah, for the perspective of the Mishnah, that would be considered a problem on Shabbos. Again, Amar Ula v'chilafemish. Alma, Kasavar Ula, it appears that Ula is of the opinion that Komidi dechazi li'ish, lechazi li'isha, umidi dechazi li'isha, lechazi li'ish. It appears that Ula is of the perspective of the opinion that what a man wears, a woman cannot wear, and what a woman wears, a man cannot wear. Meaning, the style of men and women are opposites in nature. And so what is appropriate for one gender is not appropriate for the other gender. Rebberal, admittedly, first of all, styles and general sentiment has changed. And even more specifically, I know in Rebberal, I think you pointed out last time, today it would certainly not be a popular statement to say that there are any kind of rules for what a man and woman can wear. But that is the halacha, and that is the discussion. That's apparently what Ula believes here.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Does that mean that a man can walk out with a needle with an eye in it?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because at this point, we're only talking about rings. We're only talking about rings. There's two types of rings in the eyes of halacha. There's a decorative ornamental ring, and there is a business ring. And a business ring for a guy might be considered ornamental. It would be considered an item that telegraphs his status. Not everybody gets to have a ring. Maybe you have to have a title. If you have a title, you own land.
You have a Masonic ring.
I'm sorry, what's that?
A Masonic ring. The Masons wear a special ring that identifies them.
Yeah. So that is what Ula is saying. So the Gemara says, can we infer from here that Ula generally believes that whatever a man can wear, a woman cannot, and vice versa? Mosiv Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says we've got a problem with this. We've got an indication that there is no such blanket rule that men and women cannot wear each other's clothing. There are certain items that are unisex. They can be worn by men and women. Masiv Rav Yosef, we have an instance of Haroyim Yoitzim Bisakin. A shepherd, the Tosefta teaches us, may go out on Shabbos with a kind of garment that was called sacks. And Rashi explains, Shemachasim Bahem Ipnei Argishamim. It was somewhat waterproof. It would be like a poncho or a raincoat. It was a thicker, less porous material. V'lo haroyim bilvad amru, and not only shepherds are permitted to wear a raincoat. Elakol adam, every human being. Rashi, and we're going to use this as an analogy for men versus women. Alma, afal gav deloy regili bay, even though regular folks don't typically wear sacks on themselves, shepherds apparently regularly do, probably by virtue of the fact that they spend a lot of time outside. Nonetheless, migoy de legabi hai tachshit, legabi hai nami tachshit, being that this garment is considered an acceptable part of the wardrobe and apparel of certain folks, it becomes acceptable for all folks. And being that we are comfortable with such a principle, the same should apply between men and women. So let's read this Gemara again. Master Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef has a challenging text that says, Haroyim yotzim b'sakim. Shepherds can wear this sack material. And not only shepherds, elokol adam. Really any human being. Why would the Tosefta choose to focus on shepherds if it's universally acceptable? Well, because we talk about a common and predictable scenario. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation. Based on the same principle, although men don't generally wear women's ornaments and women don't generally wear men's ornaments, since occasionally a man might wear an ornament belonging to a woman and vice versa, they should be entirely permissible for men and women to wear alike. All right. Buckle your seatbelts. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says it's not a good analogy. You know why? Shepherds and scientists and rabbis, they're all different trades of the same type of people. But maybe there is a greater distinction between male and female than the distinction between different men and different women of the same class or the same trade. Rav Yosef explains, women are from an entirely different universe. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And so you have a lot of different men. They might have different trades with different kinds of clothing, but they're more alike than a man is to a woman. You might not like this statement, but the Gemara is inferring that Ula understands this to be the case. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation. I like mine, but let's see what he says. The difference between a standard practice of men and women is greater than the difference between the standard practice of practitioners of different professions. Now, I'm not sure if you know this. I should probably shut off the recording for now, but you know, in 1294, the Talmud was burnt. What year was the Talmud burnt in France? After the Pope called for scrutiny of the Talmud. Hold on, burning of Talmud, France. Bear with me just a moment. I know we're going off topic again, but I'm sorry, no, 1240. 1240, King Louis burnt the Talmud. This was following a demand by Pope Gregory. Why did they burn the Talmud? Because it said things that were not politically correct. It talked about the founder of a faith that was very popular in that era, and they felt that the Talmud had to be burnt because it can't speak out against the popular sentiment. I certainly hope, but wouldn't be shocked if we'd find in today's world similar calls because of different unpopular comments. So this statement certainly would not be popular and doesn't need to go on Twitter or Facebook. But ultimately, the halacha is looking from a very practical perspective. There are certain distinctions that are more extreme, more great and extensive between any male and any female than between different males of social status or profession. And I think that we might be able to agree on that. But anyways, that's the Gemara's comment, and that's how it goes.
Rabbi,
Yes, Rabbi
does it
Allen.
mean, does it mean that a nurse can come in with her nursing outfit and a surgeon can come in with his surgical clothes?
So right now we're not talking about clothing. We're talking about clothing that's not clothing. So we're not talking about style of clothing. We're talking about other accessories that are commonly considered part of the wardrobe presentation. But I guess by extension, yes, certainly. A nurse, well, first of all, men can and women both can be nurses. And so there's certain implements of a trade or certain parts of the uniform that can be worn and certain parts that should probably not be worn. Probably an interesting analogy, although I'm not going to give you an answer, is a doctor and a stethoscope. Is a stethoscope an implement of the trade or is it an apparel? Is it part of their apparel?
No, it's the trade.
It is the trade, but it's also part of the look. When, for political purposes, different administrations of different political persuasions need to have doctors to make statements that make them look good or support them. Take a look. For some reason, they're all going to wear a certain kind of very recognizable garment, and many of them will be wearing stethoscopes. Although certainly when they're called for a press conference at the White House, there was nobody they needed to be listening to their heartbeat or their breathing. But a stethoscope is more than just the apparel of a physician. It is also a very recognizable implement of a physician, although I suppose nurses too. So I'm not going to weigh in on if you can wear it, if you can't wear it, if it's considered an ornament or not, but I'm just making the point that there are different parts of a professional's wardrobe. And if you want to order a costume to look like a doctor, it'll probably include a stethoscope. So what does that say? I don't know what it says, but anyways, something to think about. All right, let's see.
But he is carrying his stethoscope. He's not.
Are they carrying it? Or are they wearing? Well, they're wearing it around their neck, right?
It's just looped around the neck.
But that's the way they wear it.
So I can come in with a chain. Or
no, I'm not. I'm not making any halachic pronouncements. I'm just trying to draw a contemporary analogy of professions that have implements of their trade, but it's not exclusively used when you're wielding your implement. It's also used to broadcast who you are. If you want people to listen to you with the authority of a doctor, you might want to wear a stethoscope so that people know you're a doctor. That's my point. And so perhaps in times past, you might wear a signet ring to indicate that you are a person of stature. You're a person of influence. You have assets. You do business. And so I think that's the analogy. Again, in the modern world, I'm not sure, maybe you'll help me out. I'm not sure what a business person would use to telegraph. Today, you might drive a certain kind of car or wear a certain cut suit, but that's a little bit more vague. 15, 20 years ago, you would carry a Palm Pilot around. That would tell you that you're a very serious person of business and whatever. Today, everyone has a cell phone. So again, it's no longer a distinguishing item. So help me out. I don't know. But anyways, all right, let's read a few more lines and then we'll call it a day.
So you get a bus driver coming in with the wheel.
No, but a farmer might have once worn, what do you call it? How do you call it? Overalls.
Overall.
All right, I hope we didn't just scare someone off our share. All right, let's just do a few more lines and we'll call it a day. So the Gemara asked, what is Ula thinking? Ula's comment that says that the law for a ring, remember that's how it all started. A woman cannot wear a ring with a seal. And the opposite is for a man. A man can wear that. And so we think we can infer that Ula believes that men and women are diametrically opposed to the extreme, so that what is permissible for a woman to wear, a man cannot. The Gemara challenges it by showing that you have shepherds that have a certain kind of clothing that they wear, ornamentally or otherwise, and because it is acceptable for one trade, all males of the population can wear it, or maybe all humans can wear it, indicating that even though one segment of the population might have a distinct style that is apart from other folks of the population, we still make that item permissible. So the same should apply to men and women. And the Gemara answers, there's actually, in a sense, a greater difference, a greater distinction between gender than all different people of the same gender who do all different kinds of things and are born into different positions in life. That was the whole point of the Gemara. Furthermore, Abaya challenges Rav Yosef's statement, which was that Ula distinguishes. Actually, let me see. I used to Abai asked the question. Hamaitze tefillin, machnisin zug zug. You find tefillin outside Shabbos. You got to save them from disgrace. So what do? Machnisan zug zug. You wear them, walk them into town. Go back and do the next one. Rashi. Machnisan li'ir derech malbush. You can carry it into the city even though there's no erev. If you wear it as wear tefillin. Zug zug. You put on one pair of tefillin on your head, the shal roish. You put the shal yad on your arm. That's what you do. You can't carry it, but you can wear it. And the Mishnah says, echad ha'ish, ve'echad ha'isha. Both men and women are allowed to put on tefillin in this manner to save it from ruin, disgrace, or loss. Rashi. Even though really for a lady who never wears tefillin, it's not a conventional thing to see a woman wearing tefillin. We say because for the human population, 50% of the human population wear tefillin, and therefore, or at least could wear or should wear tefillin, and it's considered something nice. It's a good look for men, so women can wear it too. But this challenges your assertion that men and women are from different planets. And we know that women are exempt from tefillin. So why are they allowed to wear the tefillin? Hasam Kasavar Meir. Laila's man tefillin. Shabbos man tefillin. Nighttime you could wear tefillin. On Shabbos you could wear tefillin. So if that's the case, Havali mitzvahs asay shaloyaz man grama. It could be that Rav Meir, who's the opinion in the Brisa we're analyzing, who makes no difference between men and women, might say that women actually do need to wear tefillin. Because if you believe that you're always meant to wear tefillin, now tefillin is no longer a mitzvah that's time-bound. And if tefillin is not a mitzvah that's time-bound, then women would have to wear it. We have to stop here. I know we're like in a very juicy and exciting section over here. For the moment, it sounds like women can and should put on tefillin, or at the very least, it's acceptable. Why don't we leave off over here? We'll resume on Sunday. I want to thank you all for joining us on today's Gemara. Maybe not the most politically correct, but I guess that's what makes it exciting and interesting and important to discuss. So just to remind you, we're in the middle of a new Mishnah that's revisiting mostly women's style, women's clothing, and it's items that are perceived, at least according to the first opinion, to be biblically prohibited. We've begun now to ask and contrast, do we say that men and women halachically are diametrically opposed about what they can and cannot wear? If so, how do we make sense of it? And we're still in the middle of wading through the conversation of how do we understand the relationship of men to women and vice versa. We'll pick up on Sunday, and if we wanted to get a lot of attendance, I suppose we could tease this out with the right title, but we'll leave it on the down low. Insiders only. Have a wonderful day, a good Shabbos. Hope everyone stays healthy and well, and let's have loads of good news. Any final comments?
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Roberto. Shika Grus to Montreal. Rabbi Allen, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Professor, we missed you when you were off. We're grateful to have you back on. And I hope your vision will continue to improve and your eyes should feel good and be good. And thank you for being along for the ride. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Shalom Ber. Chumash? All right. In a moment, we'll end this link and we'll resume with Chumash with Rabbi Shalom Ber. Same link. Have a good Shabbos.